Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I am Kristen Welker in Washington with the Middle East and much of the world again on edge as President Trump publicly weighs a U.S. strike on Iran to take out its nuclear program after calling for Tehran's, quote, unconditional surrender. Just moments ago, the president spoke to reporters in the Oval Office about the possibility of the U.S. getting directly involved after senior administration officials told NBC News, quote, all options remain on the table.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
What's your message to Americans, both here and abroad, who are not only concerned about the U.S. potentially getting involved in another conflict in the Middle East, but worry about the potential for retaliation here at home?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get involved either, but I've been saying for 20 years, maybe longer, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time. And I think they were a few weeks away from having one.
The president also saying that he was about to huddle with advisors in the Situation Room. And here's more from the president. This is earlier today, responding to a reporter's question about the possibility of a U.S. strike on Iran.
May do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble. And they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction. Two very simple words, a very simple, unconditional surrender. That means I've had it. Okay, I've had it, I give up, no more. And then we go blow up all the, all the nuclear stuff that's all over the place.
Mr. President, what do you say to the supreme leader of Iran who says that they will not surrender?
Say good luck.
The president's Secretary of Defense was also pressed on the Pentagon's current plans as he testified before Congress on Capitol Hill. Take a look.
My question for you is whether you have been asked actively to provide options for the president regarding a strike in the Middle East.
If I had or I had not, I wouldn't disclose that in this forum, Senator. My job, our job, the chairman and I, at all times, is to make sure the president has options and is informed of what those options might be and what the ramifications of those options might be.
I appreciate that.
Meanwhile, on the ground in Israel, the IDF says Iran launched a new wave of missile strikes today with air raid sirens blaring across the country for the 6th consecutive day. It follows the barrage of Iranian missile and drone attacks on Jerusalem and Tel Aviv overnight, which Israel says most were intercepted. And in Iran, the country's army says it downed one of Israel's drones for the first time, releasing this video. Israel's Air Force acknowledged the incident, and it comes after President Trump claimed yesterday, quote, we have total control of the skies over Iran. Joining me now is NBC News Chief National Affairs and Justice Correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, who's at the White House, and NBC News International Correspondent Matt Bradley is in Tel Aviv. Kelly, I want to start with you. The president saying he believed Iran was a few weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. Really powerful to hear him say that. He also said he hasn't made a final decision yet. He likes to wait until the final moment to do so, which is consistent with what we know about President Trump. What are your sources telling you, Kelly, is the very latest thinking inside the White House?
Well, it is certainly interesting to watch how the president is presenting some of his thought process publicly, which is not only his sort of stream of consciousness way of engaging, but also is a signal to Iran and to the world about where he is at this time, talking about their desire to negotiate and certainly talking about the fact that he has run out of patience. Those are certainly signals toward coming to a decision point. But the president didn't give a specific timeline except to say it could be over the next week. But he also he was not firm in that. He said it could also be sooner before a decision would be made. It's unclear exactly how close the United States is to engaging in any way, or if they will, he and his team will decide that this is not the time to use American firepower and resources, namely the type of aircraft that Israel does not possess, to be a part of any definitive action to bring about a more formidable end to Iran's nuclear ambitions. So the short answer is the president appears to be wanting to maintain flexibility publicly. We don't have a sense of where the decision clock is behind the scenes. We've heard a variety of different things, but only the president would ultimately be the arbiter of this. He did indicate there's another Situation Room meeting today, and so perhaps that will move the ball another incremental step. But his words to Iran are very clear. They are harsh, and he also seemed to acknowledge that this is not something he relishes doing if he were to take such action. Kristen?
Well, Kelly, let me pick up on that final point that you make because it's an important one. This is a president who campaigned on an America First foreign policy in both of his campaigns. And part of the MAGA movement is based on this idea of getting out of foreign entanglements. And so you really have the MAGA universe divided on this. What can you tell us about that? And how much pressure, quite frankly, Kelly, is the president getting from some quarters of his base not to go into Iran?
There's considerable pressure because he's been clear about this, and he said it again today. He does not want war. War in an extended way seemed to be what he was suggesting. That might be different in his calculation than some limited strikes that might have some definitive ability to reset things, especially on Israel's behalf, and frankly for U.S. national interest to not have Iran have a nuclear weapon. His frustration, certainly Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, his frustration of wanting to bring this to some kind of closure is evident, but certainly many of the president's followers in the United States do not want foreign intervention. So would they judge it differently if there is a short-term action? Certainly the vice president posted about the president having earned some trust in the MAGA world. That seemed to be a message to MAGA followers that the president may have to make some hard decisions and that he is taking it all into account. Again, hard to discern. We're trying to read all of the tea leaves, but those pressure points are real. Push from Israel, certainly, to get some help from the United States, and certainly some domestic concerns about potential for retaliation and enlarging the U.S. footprint abroad.
Kelly, there are so many dynamic forces at play there. You lay it all out so well. Matt Bradley, let me go to you in the region. What is the very latest that you are hearing on the ground there? What's the feeling in Israel right now? Are people eager to have the United States join with the campaign that is underway there?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer your second question first. People are very eager to see the United States throwing in behind Israel. As far as the Israelis that I've spoken to are concerned, Israel is fighting a fight for the entire world. They think the United States should want to participate in this. And while so many here were so hopeful to see President Donald Trump take over after the previous president, who many people here felt wasn't really necessarily supporting Israel to the extent that they would like. They were hoping that President Trump would be so much better than Joe Biden in terms of his support for Israel. I think that they're disappointed to see the president equivocating like he is right now. But I have to tell you, at the same time, there's all this high hopes for the president pitching in with American weapons to finish the job against Iran. And that's what I keep hearing. The Americans should finish the job. There is this feeling here that actually things have kind of turned a corner over just the past 2 days. It's been well more than 48 hours since we've seen any fatalities here in Israel from Iranian bombardments. We just saw a couple of hours ago another siren, another round of strikes. But they were so diminished from what we've seen even just a couple of days ago, and certainly from what we saw Friday night during Iran's first multiple waves of retaliations that lit up the sky across the skyline behind me. And now it looks as though Iran's retaliations have become feeble, not lethal, and it looks as though folks here are waiting to see Iran just end its retaliations. They're looking already ahead to what's next. And I mean, I think that the big shoe that's about to drop is how Donald Trump decides whether or not to weigh into this ongoing conflict. I can tell you that we've heard from the top people here that even if Donald Trump decides not to help destroy the remainder of the Iranian nuclear program at Fordo with one of these GBU-57s, these bunker buster bombs, the Israelis are prepared to do it on their own. And we've heard this from the top echelons of power here, publicly stating, yes, we would love to see the United States weigh in, but Israel will take out those bunkers with the remaining centrifuges, the remaining capability to enrich uranium, whether the United States helps or not.
Matt Bradley, thank you so much for your fantastic reporting. As always, please continue to stay safe. We really appreciate it. Let me now bring in Israeli Ambassador to the U.S., Yechiel Leiter. Ambassador Leiter, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Christian.
It's wonderful to have you and your perspective at this really critical moment. You just heard me discussing with my colleague, Matt Bradley, the possibility of the United States joining Israel in its attacks against Iran's nuclear program. What is the perspective of Israel right now? Can you achieve your end goal without the United States support, or is the United States support necessary?
I think the support of the United States is important. We've asked the United States to support us in a defensive posture. The administration, President Trump, Congress, the American people have been so kind in providing us with defensive missile systems, the THAAD, the Aegis. They've saved many, many lives over the past few days when these ballistic missiles come careening in from Iran to our population centers. But I think it's important to remember that while our primary objective is protecting our state, our people, I would quote the German Chancellor, Merz, who said today that Israel is doing the dirty work on behalf of the world. This is a regime that has spread death and destruction, mayhem and murder around the world, from the Sahel in Africa to southern South America to terrorist groups all around the Middle East. They've threatened their neighbors, and of course, they threaten us with extinction. They've created a ring of fire by their proxies around our country. They sent Hamas to attack us on October 7th. They slaughtered 1,200 of our civilians in one day. They sent the Hezbollah to fire missiles into our northern region. We're now taking out the head of the snake. It's good for Israel. It's good for the region. It's good for the world.
Ambassador, President Trump says he has not made a final decision. He says he makes the final decision in the final moments. But do you have a sense of which way the United States is leaning right now? Is it your expectation that you think it is likely that the United States will provide military support and join in a more forceful way in these attacks against Iran's nuclear programs, Fordo, for example?
I can tell you this, Christian, since I came to Washington as Israel's ambassador just a few months ago, it's been a pleasure working with the Trump administration. The president says what he means what he says. He shows tremendous leadership. He has a wonderful relationship with our prime minister. They've both been warning now for 15 years that Iran cannot achieve a pathway to a nuclear bomb. He has repeated this some 13 times since he was elected. I think it's very, very clear. I am quite confident that the president will support our efforts to prevent Iran from having this weapon of mass destruction and these ballistic missiles that they're producing at a rate of 300 a month with the intent of raining them down on civilian population centers. This is a malevolent actor, and the president has set about an international policy of peace through strength. Peace through strength means that malevolent actors have to be taken out.
Speaking of which, I do want to play something that we just heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu this week, and we'll do some analysis on the other side. Take a listen.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year. It could be within a few months, less than a year.
Iran plans to have 190,000 centrifuges. With this massive capacity, Iran could make the fuel for an entire nuclear arsenal, and this in a matter of weeks, once it makes that decision. By next spring, at most, by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb.
So, Ambassador Leiter, that was actually a compilation of sound bites of the prime minister throughout the years, going as far back as 2012. Given the urgent warnings he has been delivering for quite some time, why is this moment different from your perspective?
Well, you know, there is a point of combustion. It's not very logical to say that if it hasn't happened until now, then it's not going to happen. The fact of the matter is that the president gave the Ayatollah 60 days. The 60 days were up. He was playing games with this negotiations. He wasn't doing it in good faith. And the day that the 60 days were over, the IAEA, the international agency overseeing atomic weapons or atomic development, nuclear development, issued a damning report against the Iranians, saying that whatever the prime minister has been saying for the past 15 years is actually true, that they're racing towards a nuclear bomb. So our intel also showed the same thing. And I got to add one more point. You know, it took 15 years for Adolf Hitler to rise to power and achieve the necessary militarization in order to launch the Second World War. And during that period of time, people were saying, well, the warnings are not necessarily serious. He hasn't done it until now. And they sat on their hands and they appeased him. And at the end of the day, because they didn't want war, they got a war, a big war, Second World War, in which 65 million people were killed and a third of our people, the Jewish people, were annihilated in gas chambers. We cannot take that chance again. This is a war that we're prosecuting right now to end all wars. If we prosecute this properly and Iran is defanged, there's going to be a new Middle East. And if there's a new Middle East, there's a new globe. And it's a fulfillment of the president's vision for a world without war. Look, we've accomplished in pairing our pilots with American products, with the F-35, which, by the way, is produced in Fort Worth, Texas, which is exactly the distance from Washington as Tehran is from Israel. We've paired together the American product and the Israeli pilot, and we've done in 3 days what Russia hasn't accomplished in 3 years. We can accomplish this. We can do this together, and we can ensure that the Middle East goes into a Abraham Accord mode 2.0 and fulfill the president's vision of peace in the Middle East and the world.
Mr. Ambassador, you take me to part of my next question. Very quickly, is diplomacy still possible? Is it still possible for President Trump to strike this deal that he was trying to reach with Iran? Could that be an off-ramp, or is it too late in your perspective?
You know, we've been skeptical about negotiations with the mullahs of Tehran for a long time. It doesn't surprise us that people who murder also lie and don't negotiate in good faith. But the president knows nobody's going to fool President Trump. And if there's a possibility to negotiate this thing whereby we see complete dismantlement of their nuclear program, of their ballistic missile program, and their end of support for proxies spreading terror around the world, that can be achieved through negotiations. It's only President Trump that can achieve that.
Okay. Ambassador Michael Leiter, thank you so much for joining us at this really critical moment in the Middle East. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Christian. Good evening.
And good evening to you, too. Appreciate it. Joining me now is retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt, former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. There is a lot to talk about. Let's start with Iran's Fordo Enrichment Center. This is one of the potential targets. The facility itself, of course, built deep inside a mountain. What would it take to actually do significant damage to the Fordo site?
Well, to the extent that the Israelis had not already done a significant amount of damage, the fact remains to the coup de grace to finish this off will have to require some of the GBUs that we have, the bunker busters, the 30,000-pound bombs that the Israelis don't have. May not be done with one, may take 2 or 3 attacks on it. But I'm confident that we've got the capability to knock it out if the president makes that decision.
Well, administration officials, as you know, are saying that, look, the president's considering a range of options. The president himself, really in an extraordinary exchange with reporters this afternoon, said he has not made a final decision. General, what do you think the other options look like that the president might be considering?
Well, it's really up to the Iranians. I think the option that he is considering is that the Iranians see the foolishness of their lack of diplomacy, their lack of willingness to talk about this. And I think the only other option is for the Iranians to come and say, we are going to dismantle our program in its entirety, allow you to inspect and verify. And at that point, we can call this a day.
Well, you know, of course, the justification for this, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, is that Iran is close to developing a nuclear weapon. You just heard me discussing that with the ambassador. Do you think that the Trump administration would agree to join Israel's military operations if it didn't agree with that assessment? In other words, would President Trump have to see intelligence that led him to believe that that was the case?
Well, as I said, it would require, if the Iranians promise to dismantle their program to avoid further attacks, it would not only be on their promise, but there would have to be a harsh inspection and verification regime put into place and significant penalties if they violate it.
And, you know, I want to ask you a similar question to the one that I just ended my last conversation on, which is there an off-ramp here? And from your perspective, militarily, how can this be de-escalated? Or is it too late for that, General?
Look, I think that the Israelis are going to be going after Fordow one way or the other. If they have the Americans help them do it, in fact, that method of bombing it is possible. But look, there's always an off-ramp. We understand there was a message delivered today from Iran through Oman. Look, there's always a chance to stop wars, but they usually stop at the negotiating table, not on the battlefield. So let's hope the Iranians recognize the error of their ways, to use a very trite term, and realize it's over for their nuclear program. The only question is, how much more are they going to pay as a country and as a society for that nuclear program to end?
General Kimmitt, very quickly before I let you go, is it your assessment that given these strikes that Israel has launched at Iran, that it is in a uniquely weakened state right now, and that if the United States were to get involved, that could be the final blow to its nuclear program?
Yes.
Okay, well, nothing more definitive than that. Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.